Hello and welcome to episode 17 of Anime Figure Archive. I'm Senpai and today we are taking a look at one of my most anticipated figures of 2025. You know on this channel that we do appreciate Bear Panda, so we do get excited for any Bear Pandas that enter this studio. I am personally very invested in the 1/4 lineup, and as of the time of this video, they have 5 of them available, of which I own all 5 of them, including the Asuka from Evangelion, which we'll see in a later review by Kohai. But prior to Asuka, this Bear Panda right here, which is the Black Sister 1/4 scale, was my most anticipated figure. I think the design looks fantastic and as of right now appears to be their most complicated 1/4 design yet. But even still, it carries their low MSRP. All 1/4s from Bear Panda up until Asuka from Evangelion came in at 399 Chinese yuan. But they have steadily been increasing in yen price. They started as low as 9,900 yen, and the Black Sister here is now up to 12,650 yen. She came out in October 2025, but I ordered from Ami, so she's been stuck in shipping purgatory. So this review is 4 months late, but I am quite excited to open her up and feature her on this channel. Friendly reminder, when we hit episode 25 of AFA, we're going to take a look at my 1/2.5 scale Kirino that I got from Kohai. So if you like this review format and in-depth reviews, consider subscribing. And if you like 18 plus figures, consider subscribing to our Not Safe for Work channel, Kohai's Curiosities. If we're not posting on this channel, we're posting on that channel. Up until Bear Panda's most recent collaboration with Evangelion, all of their figures have been sourced from doujin artists. The artist behind Black Sister is Masami Chie, who does many 18 plus works. And if you've been in the figure collecting scene for a while, you may even recognize other figures that she's responsible for. And one of which is my favorite binding figure to date, which is the 1/4 scale Ally. And this right here being the original source artwork. And a more recent figure that she's responsible for that you might recognize is based off this source artwork here of Arisa Mama, of which this is the final figure. For the figure we're going to look at today, this is the original source artwork, of which there are some minor differences, which of course we will go over. But one interesting thing about this artwork here is that there's a matching counterpart. She's called the Black Sister because she is wearing black, but features pale skin. And her counterpart is called White Sister because she is wearing white, but of darker complexion. Unfortunately, based on what we see on my figure collection, there doesn't seem to be any plans in the works to create the White Sister variant, which is most unfortunate because we don't see a lot of representation for darker skin tones in anime figures. But this is also reflective of what we see in anime. And lastly, if you like what you see today, she is still available on Ami with all the bonus parts. Now, since she's been available since October and she's still in stock, there's a decent chance that she might go on sale soon. And taking a look at the box, we have dimensions in the corner, and this is very reminiscent of some of the Bear Pandas we've already seen. On the side here, even though she is Black Sister, it says Fallen Nun. And we can see a prototype photo on the back, and once again repeating Fallen Nun. And here's our first look at the figure, also with dimensions in the corner. Before I talk about the figure, she came with a lot of bonuses, one of which is a keychain that is two-sided. And interestingly enough, it came with a mouse pad, though this features the figure on it, not the artwork. We get an alternate face with the Follow Me eyes, and a fabric face mask to put over those eyes. Initial impressions? Damn, she is absolutely stunning. If this is a character design that you like, you will adore this figure. And I think objectively, this is Bear Panda's best 1/4 so far. I can confidently say that at this point, we are at Freeing's level, which is extremely impressive for the price we pay and all the bonuses that we get. So let's take a closer look. Just from this close-up and angle alone, there is so much good here to look at. It is highly cultured, particularly for not being an 18 plus figure. We are eating good right now. There's so much going on here, I almost don't even know where to start, but the color palette I think is on point. And their choices between flat, like matte paints and gloss paints, I think are exceptional. We can see a clear distinction between the dark purple hair and the black accents. Many figure companies struggle to do that, right? Sometimes the hair just blends away into their accessories. In this case, they stand out just enough. Then you have the aesthetics, right, of her pink eyes coming through and how that accents her pink tongue. You see these flat elements up top, right, minus the glossy tongue, right, to have saliva. The gloss black of her arm sleeves look fantastic, contrasting with the flat white here, right, of her breast coverings. gold accents all around, once again with black down to her bodysuit and kind of this harness she's got going on. And then the illusion here of this transparent section over her stomach. On the back, we have her little demonic halo thing she's got going on, which is a clear plastic, but accentuated in the middle with this purple stripe all the way around and fading into these pink tips. I'm already extremely impressed just in the way this figure captures light. It lets me know that a lot of attention to detail was done by the designers. Figures, particularly at this scale, can easily look too flat, as many of these surfaces have to be painted. And of course, as we scale up, there's just more of that surface area. I think they've done a fantastic job here of choosing this color palette and the differences between matte and glossy sections. For us cultured individuals, there's something here for almost everyone. We have the ahegao tongue, but if you don't like that, her alternate face has closed lips. She has large, voluptuous breasts, but at least they're not the size of beach balls, and they do have a nice, little more natural sag to them. We have the aesthetic of nipples poking through, and it's painted to give it a more sheer look. Even though these are pliable, you cannot peel them back and force cast her off. There is nothing underneath. On her left breast, it's completely smooth. And on her right breast, shortly past her nipple, is a peg. The nipples you see here are fully modeled into this white segment. On her necklace, this is an actual metal chain. Now, they've chosen to keep the cross here plastic, but I'm okay with that because that means that aesthetically, it perfectly matches these accents down here. If this were metal, it'd be significantly more glossy than some of her other details. I think this was a good choice, not only to save money, but just to look aesthetic for the figure. If for some reason you didn't like this, yes, you can remove the necklace. But I think falling into her cleavage is very aesthetic. We'll show this again as we move further down, but if you are into stomachs, right, and belly buttons, you have a nice view here as well as the sculpt. And she even has stuff for the armpit people, right? She has her armpit raising up here, and they've made the inside glossy to make it look sweaty. This is one of the few times I've seen this done on a figure, and I think they've captured the aesthetic just right. I think this is a good implementation of adding gloss to skin. From this view too, we also see a lot of movement, particularly in the hair, right? We have her long hair draping down and curling back up because she's flipping it up with this hand here. And then of course everything fades down and blows out to the sides, which we can see down here. And aesthetically, I also enjoy the mystery of only seeing one of her eyes. I'm just already so impressed by what we see here. And to continue our discussion on movement, I've flipped her around where you can see lots of movement in the veil here and once again extending down into the hair. She just has lots of great angles to appreciate. Getting closer, let's go ahead and look at the default face here. The eye decals look fantastic. They're set nicely, extremely crisp, and we have blush. As mentioned before, I really like the aesthetic here of her pink eyes and her purple hair. The mouth is exceptional both in paint and modeling. This is something that Bear Panda is really good at. Not only do we have white for her teeth, we have lipstick all around, and they've correctly chosen to use a gloss paint for the tongue, and we can even see a fade on that paint job. Lots of attention to detail here, which is important given this is such a prominent feature of this face. And real quickly before I swap, yes, they did detail the other eye, so of course you can see it at certain angles. Now here she is with the alternate face, which has the follow me eyes. I tend to not like follow me eyes too much, but they look best on 1/4 just because when they're scaled up, they look a little more natural. In this case though, it really changes her eye shape and even like the size appearance of it, so I don't think they quite got them correct here. This is not the face that I would use, with one exception. But before I talk about that, we can see that in this face, her mouth is closed. She still features lipstick, which is great, and we have a line in the middle to enhance those lips. And this here is my favorite bonus part that she includes, and this is an aesthetic I can really get behind. This is an actual fabric blindfold that you can stretch over either faceplate, and there is enough room to push this faceplate back in without any issues. To me, there's just something about the aesthetic of a blindfold for a nun that I think works extremely well. And I like the artistic side, right, of the eroticism that a blindfold has, but also maybe even some of the religious context where she's dressed to the nines and looks highly erotic, but at the same time, she's wanting to not see maybe some of the depravity in the world. So I think this was just a great inclusion and actually something we do not see in the artwork. But it's this combo right here that I really adore, and I'm pretty sure this is how I'm going to display her. As much as I like her pink eyes, I find the eroticism of this combination to be the sweet spot for me. But I think this aesthetic is much better shown zoomed out on the figure. To me, this is my favorite artistic representation of this figure. I think the eroticism is on point, and to me, even gives it a more religious context. Moving back to the hair though, the base is this flat purple, but they did choose a more satin finish so it reflects the light well. It has two different forms of highlights in it. In the front, we see this pink color, right, that's fading down at the tips here. And on this side, we start to see this blue fade. Assuming you're not distracted by this view, you can see that the ends of her hair have that blue tip. That pink is only on the front side of her bangs. Moving up to her bunny ears, we can see that the insides are shaded with a light purple airbrushing, something that we can't say is true for every freeing figure. And here's a look at her demonic halo here in the back. This is actually a clear translucent piece, but they've gone through and painted with an airbrush of purple around the edges on both sides. And you can see that fading at the ends, where once again we see a pink. So continuing those pink and purple accent colors. It's attached to her veil at the bottom, and although it's snug and not going anywhere, due to the spikes and the leverage that you have whenever you're making changes to her, it is really easy to knock off. So do be careful of that. This is a good angle to show you that her left hand is fully modeled, and we can see that she has these gloss black gloves on. Gloss black has traditionally been where Bear Panda has struggled. Our Konata had many rough spots in the finish, so it wasn't completely glossy throughout. Our Yuna literally had fingerprints in her bunny ears that caused me to have to return them. And in this case, the gloss looks exceptional, and I can only find one area that is defective on mine. So I'm very pleased with how much Bear Panda has improved overall. And before I put her head back on, this is a good chance to show you this rather ridiculous view back here. I can appreciate that they still added a lot of strap detail here in the back, even though this is normally covered up by her hair. This section here that turns into a thong that goes down to the center of her buttocks, and the hand are good examples again of how light is refracted off this figure. It looks exceptional. It's also a good angle to show you that they even modeled in folds and creases in her skin where the straps go across her torso. Of course, this is true on the other side, and we can even see the small of her back right here and the details of her shoulders. Moving down, the paint and modeling detail continue to be stunning. The area right between her breasts is extremely clean when it comes to each of the gold accents, and that gloss really accentuates the modeling details where these do look just like real straps. I'm extremely impressed with this general area. Moving down, we see kind of this beautifully exaggerated stomach anatomy that we see in many anime arts. The belly button looks particularly good, and then the shading here to give it the sheer effect and accent some of the ab lines looks fantastic. This area is slightly different though in the artwork, which I will show you later. And the culture just doesn't stop. This is easily one of the most erotic clothes figures that I now have in my collection. Even though the skin itself doesn't have any shading, the modeling does such a good job of capturing light to accentuate her hip bones, right? And then the lines down to her vulva on the side. This paired with the natural V that we've got from the front of her bodysuit and all these converging just looks so good. This is potentially one of my favorite angles on this figure. Moving down, looking at her gloss black stockings, the detail work in the buckles once again is really good. This is some form of like machine painted decal that we've seen in other figures before, because there are some spots where you can see where they overlap and get kind of sloppy. But right here is one of the only few mistakes that this figure actually has, where we can see a little bit of that gold getting out of the line. I'll have to show an enhanced photo of this, but one of the only areas where I have a defect in my gloss paint is right here on the side of her left leg. In comparison to Yuna and Konata, this is a major improvement, particularly given how much gloss paint this figure uses. Again, very pleased with how far Bear Panda has come. And on the right side of her leg, this is one of the best areas to see where that line overlaps itself. Extremely subtle though, and something most people would never notice. Then down to her heels, we can see it continues that gold and black aesthetic, with the sides of the shoes being one of the only areas where the paint semi-struggles to stay within the lines, and that's because these had to be painted back in and aren't a separate piece. And lastly, while we have the camera down here, here's a very cultured angle. A very voluptuous figure all around. Taking a step back and looking at the paint, Bear Panda has absolutely killed it on this figure. This is a pivotal moment to me, right? We've always enjoyed Bear Panda, but now we're seeing them completely and fully compete and even one up freeing for a figure that cost a third of their going rate. She's cheaper than so many 1/6 scales. Artistically, I think they did a fantastic job on choosing the color palette, on choosing tones between glossy, right, and matte. For a 1/4 scale figure, we see a lot of shading. We've got it on the inside of her bunny ears. We have right here her nipples, right, making this look like a sheer piece. This sheer element right here on her stomach looks fantastic. Her hair has two different highlights, right? We have pink here, blue there, and blue at the tips. Her mouth is spot on, and we see multiple colors, shading, and glossy elements just within the mouth alone. The decals of her eyes look fantastic. This is one of the best paint jobs of any 1/4 in my collection. Most certainly better than the average, and I'm comfortable giving it a 4 out of 5. When it comes to the sculpt, we're back to that same story. It's one of those times where I feel like they've actually added details worthy of being a 1/4. This middle section here, right, the details that they added to make those look like actual like stitching in those straps looks fantastic. Sculpt of the abs of her stomach, wrinkles on the side of her torso where the skin folds, that armpit detail we've got going on here. Level detail we have in the mouth, the flow of the hair. For such a static pose, we have so much movement here. It looks like we just captured like a pinup model or a pose right on the runway. And there are just so many different angles of this figure that look fantastic. Of course, part of that has to do with their character design, but also what the sculptor has done and ingested into their vision of this figure in 3D form. Again, extremely impressed. This is most certainly, once again, above average, particularly for a 1/4 figure, and I'm comfortable giving it a 4 out of 5. Even for the base, it feels like Bear Panda is listening to us and their customers. It is fantastic to see that they've continued to improve. Their 1/4 scale Konata literally wobbled back and forth, and the base wouldn't even sit flush. For their next 1/4 scale Yuna, they thickened up the base, and she was very, very stable overall, still some minor flop to her. But now moving on to this, they've started to bevel the edges and give us some geometry. I don't know why this is so hard for other companies to do. Just this beveled edge alone looks significantly more like a trophy, for example, and just gives it some dimension, captures light in a different way than your basic squared off circle. Even for the color, I'm so glad they didn't choose a gloss black base. She has so much gloss black, particularly in her stockings here, that it would have just blended and faded away, and not to mention hide details of the figure itself. Choosing an accent color is so basic, yet so many figure companies don't do that. They default to a gloss black, a flat black, or even a white base. And they always look terrible. This is so simple. They chose an accent color that perfectly matches the figure. This is very similar in tone to her hair. It's a satin finish, so it captures light well, and you can still see it reflecting the figure itself. Again, just the way this figure captures light is exceptional. They just done a good job of picking out so many little things. Other Japanese companies can start learning from Bear Panda. It's crazy that this company is just now entering the scene and already pushing ahead of many of their Japanese counterparts. But as much as I'm glazing this base, right, it's just a step up above like your gloss black cylinder. Yes, they chose an accent color. Yes, they gave it a beveled edge. We don't have any text, other gold accents, or any other things that could have pulled in from the figure, so I'm comfortable giving it a 2 out of 5. When it comes to artistry, the sculptor did such a good job of enhancing the source artwork. Yes, there are differences, but I think almost every choice that they made enhances the original vision. This is one of the few times I can say that not following the artwork made the figure better. And I love to see this happen. Converting something from 2D to 3D is a talent, right? You're literally sculpting something. And when you're sculpting something, you have a much more intimate view of what's going on at every detail. You have full control over that. And as a sculptor, you should recognize areas that need to be enhanced, areas that aren't seen in the artwork that you know you have to come up with to make it fit. And this is just such a good example of taking elements that didn't exist and enhancing what's here and not losing the spirit of the source artwork. Right off the bat, there are two major differences between the two. In the artwork, we can see that she has a drop veil, which is that netted veil on top of the black nun veil. It does seem high fashion in the artwork, and I do like the aesthetic of it, but that would not translate well to a PVC figure. Even if that was real provided cloth, it's just not going to lay right. In comparison to human scale, right, that veil would be very thin. And on a figure, it's going to end up being extremely thick. And this is where I think the sculptor took that drop veil and reimagined it as the blindfold, which to me is one of my favorite parts about this figure. In the artwork, her stomach covering is like a fishnet material, but that can be difficult to do at this scale. I've seen it done where it's printed, and it tends to look okay, but I think the choice here of just making it look sheer was better suited to a PVC figure. And it was still able to keep that eroticism of seeing her belly button. From there, we start seeing different accents. For starters, in the artwork, right, she's purely a nun, but in this, she's still a 1/4 bunny figure. In the artwork, we can see that she has that white band on her head called a coif, but of course in the figure this has been replaced with bunny ears. In the artwork, that white breaks up a lot of the black that you see around her face, and similarly, right, the inside of the bunny ears at least adds white higher up on her head, creating a similar accent. In the figure, we can see that she has that demonic halo in the back, which gives it both some religious tones plus this kind of like demonic side playing into the Black Sister aspect. I think it was an appropriate touch. In the artwork, her face matches the follow me eye face that's provided with the figure. But the default face for this figure has the ahegao tongue sticking out. And with that, the sculptor was able to completely change the vibe of this figure and really change the tone of this to a more erotic figure versus just a bishoujo figure. The only area of this figure where the artwork is a little more sensual is going to be on this piece covering the stomach going down to the crotch. You can see on the figure this is significantly wider, probably due to being a Chinese company and adding a little bit more censorship than what the artwork shows. But they at least give us one side of the vulva. Moving further still, the sculptor did add more accent pieces. Looking at the pieces that drape over her breast, they added these gold crosses here. Not only does that reflect the cross here, which is now more detailed in the figure, this actually makes this a little bit more believable because then at least the weight of the crosses would be pulling down over these flaps on her breasts. So not only was he able to add more gold details to this area, he gave it a tad more realism. We can see that the artwork stops at the top of the stockings, and here the sculptor has chosen to add more gold accents. They added gold buckles on the top to cinch them in, as well as adding the gold lines to break up all the gloss that's now at the bottom of this figure. Then the final difference I can really spot is the length of the black veil. In the artwork, it goes past her butt, and in this case, the artist has shortened this, revealing more details in her hair. So in this case, I'm a really big fan of what this sculptor has added to the vision of Masami Chie's Black Sister. I think this is a great combo, and together they created a fantastic product. And I see the figure as being the more refined, enhanced version. So as stated before, this is one of the few times I really adore the sculptor's vision better than the source artwork. Source artwork is still there, it's still the inspiration, you can display it similarly to the source artwork, but this feels even more anime-like. I feel like the sculptor really knew the target audience here. She went from just being this kind of bishoujo-like image to something that looks like a character or villain from a series. And on top of that, gave us this option for eroticism that wasn't inherently there in the source artwork. So to me, this is a 5 out of 5. For value, just like all other Bear Pandas, it's a no-brainer. The Chinese yuan price has stayed consistent, but even with the increased yen retail price, less than 13,000 yen for something that competes with 44,000 yen freeing figures, and in many cases, in my opinion, bests it, with interchangeable parts, absolutely a 5 out of 5 on the value scale. Before we go, for fun, here is a look at every single 1/4 scale Bear Panda that has been released, minus Asuka, which you all will receive a review of here shortly. And this is in order of release, starting with Konata here on the side. It is insane to me that the entirety of this collection here, at MSRP that AmiAmi sold them for, is less than 44,000 yen. That is the same price as some singular 1/4 scales from freeing, many of which are still the same rehash bunny design. This 1/4 scale lineup from Bear Panda has been an absolute joy to collect, and rest assured I do have the other two that are currently on pre-ordered. For now, I plan on collecting all of their 1/4 scales, with maybe the exception of Rei from Evangelion. I really hope you enjoyed this review of the Black Sister here, easily one of my favorite 1/4s in my entire collection. Absolutely floored by it. I don't care what religion she's pushing, what cult, suicide pact, Scientology, I don't give a shit. You'd see my ass at church. I'm Senpai. Take care.